Michelangelo, the visionary sculptor and reluctant painter, remains an eternal symbol of artistic perfection. This video explores the life and legend of the man known as Il Divino, whose work defined the very essence of the Italian Renaissance. This program is brought to you by the Series of Thoughts team as part of the Great Thinkers series. Born in 1475 in the village of Caprese, Michelangelo's destiny seemed pied to stone from the start. As a child, he was placed with a stonecutter's family, where he developed a deep fascination for the work he saw in Florence. By 13, Michelangelo was apprenticed to the painter Ghirlandaio, but his heart belonged to sculpture. His immense talent quickly drew the attention of the powerful Lorenzo de' Medici, who brought the young artist into his own palace to study. Living among the Medici, Michelangelo became deeply immersed in humanist philosophy and ancient sculpture. This period established the foundation of his style before the political instability in Florence eventually forced him to depart. In 1496, Michelangelo traveled to Rome. Here, the young artist, still largely unknown, created his first major Roman commission, the Bacchus. The statue was a triumph, securing his reputation as a talent that could rival the masters of antiquity. Michelangelo struggled as a perfectionist, often sourcing his own marble. While he identified primarily as a sculptor, his career took a dramatic turn when he was reluctantly commissioned by Pope Julius II to paint the Sistine Chapel. In 1498, a monumental opportunity arose. Cardinal Jean de Bellieres commissioned a young Michelangelo to create a Pieta for Old St. Peter's Basilica. This masterpiece launched his career and the High Renaissance into immortality. The Pieta captured an eternal moment of grief with breathtaking realism. Carved from a single block of Carrara marble, the work was so profound that Michelangelo signed it, the only piece he would ever claim as his own in this way. Upon returning to Florence in 1501, Michelangelo began his most famous work, the David. Carved from a massive, flawed block of marble, the 17-foot statue became an enduring symbol of Florentine strength and artistic genius. Michelangelo's mastery was rooted in deep anatomical study and a unique philosophy of art. He believed figures were imprisoned within the stone, and his technique focused on the physical force and explosive movement of his subjects. The unveiling of the David in 1504 was a landmark event. It took 40 men 4 days to transport the statue to its home in the Piazza della Signoria, cementing Michelangelo's place in history as a master sculptor. In 1508, the papacy summoned him back to Rome. Pope Julius II demanded he paint the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. Though he resisted the painter's role, Michelangelo ultimately produced one of the most significant works of Western art. Over 4 grueling years, Michelangelo painted 500 square meters of the chapel ceiling. His work, including the iconic Creation of Adam, transformed religious art and solidified his legendary status during the High Renaissance. Years later, in 1536, he returned to the chapel to paint the Last Judgment on the altar wall. This massive, radical work featured over 300 figures and remained a source of intense debate, showcasing his bold and daring vision. From the ceiling to the altar wall, Michelangelo's work reconciled art with faith. His ability to capture the power of the human form in motion remains his most profound contribution to theology and the history of art. Beyond his mastery of the chisel and brush, Michelangelo's inner world was a tempest of intellectual pursuit. He engaged deeply with anatomy, architecture, and poetry, viewing his art not as mere craft, but as a divine act of liberation, freeing perfect forms from imperfect stone. To achieve such anatomical precision, Michelangelo studied human cadavers at Santo Spirito. This grueling work gave him an unparalleled understanding of muscle and bone, allowing him to infuse his figures with a lifelike truth that no contemporary could replicate. Michelangelo was also a prolific writer and draftsman. He left behind hundreds of poems and thousands of preparatory sketches, offering a private look at a mind obsessively wrestling with beauty, divinity, and the complexities of the human condition. Driven by an insatiable ambition, Michelangelo often took on impossible commissions. He believed that the greatest danger was not failing to reach a high goal, but setting one's sights too low, a philosophy that made his art a revelatory experience. Michelangelo's genius extended far beyond the studio. He served as a visionary architect, a strategic military engineer, and a celebrated poet, proving that his artistic vision could reshape everything from city skylines to the defense of Florence. As an architect, his influence was transformative. From the innovative vestibule of the Laurentian Library to the design of the dome of St. Peter's Basilica, Michelangelo pioneered new formal vocabularies that would anticipate the Baroque era. In 1529, when Florence was under threat, Michelangelo took on the role of Governor General of Fortifications. He applied the same precision he used in sculpting to design complex defensive earthworks, demonstrating a mastery of engineering in the city's defense. By the height of his career, Michelangelo was regarded as the universal artist. His deep synthesis of sculptural mastery, architectural intellect, and spiritual fervor solidified his status as the most formidable creative force of the Renaissance. For Michelangelo, art and faith were inseparable. His work bridged the gap between the physical and the spiritual, earning him the title Il Divino, a recognition of his unique ability to turn marble into profound theological statements. His life was defined by a constant synthesis of ideas, whether he was challenging powerful popes to maintain his creative vision or finding divine figures hidden within raw stone. He viewed his work as a sacred science of form. In his later years, Michelangelo was named the chief architect of St. Peter's Basilica. At 71, he accepted the role, but only on the condition that he would have total autonomy, declaring he did it solely for the love of God. Even in his final chapter, his pace did not slow. He continued to manage massive projects, while his personal life remained humble, driven by a persistent internal fire that sustained him until the very end. His status as an honored elder did not diminish his drive. As the architect of St. Peter's, he refused payment and demanded complete control, ultimately dedicating his final years to shaping one of the world's most iconic structures. His final work, the Rondinini Pietà, remains a subject of intense debate. Worked upon until his death, it represents the ultimate intersection of mortality and transcendence, with figures merging back into the stone, suggesting art beyond completion. Michelangelo Buonarroti left a legacy that remains unmatched. He spent his life pushing the boundaries of what humans could create, only to find that even for a master as divine as he was, mortality was the final horizon. Michelangelo passed away in Rome on February 18, 1564, just before his 89th birthday. His remains were returned to Florence for burial at the Basilica of Santa Croce, honoring his final wish to rest in his native city and signaling the symbolic close of the High Renaissance era. The final years of his life were marked by profound dedication. He served as chief architect of St. Peter's, worked on the poignant Rondinini Pietà, and saw his legacy codified in the first biography written about a living artist by his friend, Giorgio Vasari. 5 centuries later, Michelangelo remains the ultimate synonym for artistic perfection. He challenged every generation to refuse the limits of human possibility, leaving behind a body of work that continues to define beauty, ambition, and mastery for the world.